All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going way, way back to a place called Mesopotamia. Now, this isn't just any old history lesson. This is about the place that basically invented the future. Seriously, we're going to see how this one ancient civilization created the blueprint for, well, almost everything we know today.
Okay, so first things first, let's get our bearings. The name Mesopotamia, it's actually ancient Greek, and it literally means the land between the rivers. And that's exactly what it is. We're talking about this incredibly fertile stretch of land, mostly in modern-day Iraq, but also spilling into parts of Syria, Turkey, and Iran, all defined by two legendary rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates.
So that's the big question, right? How did this one spot on the map become the birthplace of, well, cities, writing, empires, the whole shebang? What was the magic ingredient here? What allowed civilization, as we know it, to just ignite, right there between those two rivers?
So, how did it happen? Well, it wasn't one single aha moment. It was more like a slow burn, a series of game-changing inventions and ideas that, piece by piece, became the building blocks for society as we know it.
I mean, just look at the timeline here. The acceleration is insane. For tens of thousands of years, we were hunter-gatherers. Then around 10,000 BC, boom, agriculture starts. But that's just the beginning. The pace picks up like crazy. Suddenly we're in the Uruk period, around 4000 BC, and you've got the world's first cities. This wasn't just slow and steady growth, you guys. This was an absolute explosion of complexity.
Yeah, the Uruk period, this was a real game changer for our entire species. Think about it. All of a sudden, you have thousands and thousands of people living in one place. And we're not talking about a big village here. This was something totally new. A complex, organized society with specialized jobs. You had potters, priests, soldiers, the works. All this meant a concentration of resources and power on a scale that was, well, it was completely unprecedented.
Okay, but having a city creates a brand new, massive problem, right? How do you actually manage all of this? How do you keep track of food for thousands of people? How do you organize gigantic construction projects? How do you even know who owns what? You need a system. You need a way to record information.
And that is where writing comes from. Which is just fascinating when you think about it. Writing wasn't invented for poetry or great stories or epic poems. Nope. The world's first writing system, cuneiform, was basically invented for bureaucracy. Seriously, it was created by ancient accountants and managers to keep track of stuff. Food rations, jars of oil, heads of cattle. It was a tool, plain and simple, for managing the world's first complex economy.
Okay, so we've got cities, we've got writing, the basic pieces are in place. Now the stage is set for the next huge leap in how humans organize themselves, the empire.
So before this guy, Sargon of Akkad, shows up, Mesopotamia was basically a bunch of different city-states, all kind of fighting with each other. It was a real patchwork. But Sargon, he did something totally new, something no one had ever done before. He just conquered all of them. He created the world's very first empire, one giant political state stretching all the way from the Persian Gulf up into what's now Syria. And what held it all together? Pure military might.
But that brings up a really fundamental problem, doesn't it? I mean, you can conquer people with an army, sure, but how do you govern them? How do you create any sense of order or justice across a huge territory with all these different people? You can't just have soldiers on every street corner. Force alone just isn't going to cut it long term.
And this is where we see this really cool evolution in the whole idea of what an empire is. You have Sargon's model, the Akkadian Empire, which was all about military unity. It was held together by force. But then, a few centuries later, you get the Babylonians and a guy named Hammurabi. And his model was built on something much more powerful, much more lasting, a single, centralized set of laws.
Now, you've probably heard of the Code of Hammurabi. It's one of the most famous legal documents in all of history. It was this incredibly detailed list of 282 laws that covered everything you can imagine: property, contracts, even family issues. The idea was to create one standard of justice for everyone in the entire empire. But here's the kicker. It wasn't actually the first of its kind.
Yeah, and this is the fact that blows a lot of people's minds. The whole idea of writing down a universal law code, well, that had been cooking in Mesopotamia for a long, long time. The Code of Ur-Nammu, for example, came a full 3 centuries before Hammurabi's famous code. It just goes to show you how absolutely central this concept of written law was to how these civilizations worked.
All right, so the foundations are solid. We've got cities, writing, law, and the whole concept of empire. With all that in place, the scale of everything, power, ambition, and conflict, was about to get a whole lot bigger.
And that brings us to the Neo-Assyrians. When these guys rose to power around 911 BC, they were something else. They weren't just another empire. They were a terrifyingly efficient, meticulously organized military machine, on a scale the world had just never, ever seen before.
And you can just see the difference in scale. I mean, the Akkadian and Babylonian empires, they were big deals in their day for sure. But the Neo-Assyrian Empire, it just absolutely dwarfed them. At its peak, this was a genuine superpower. It stretched all the way from Persia to Egypt, and it was all built on a foundation of conquest and, frankly, ruthless efficiency.
But, as we all know, no empire lasts forever, and after centuries of absolute dominance, the seemingly invincible Assyrian capital, Nineveh, finally fell in 612 BC. A new power was rising, a resurgent Babylon. The center of the world shifted south again, and this new Neo-Babylonian empire, well, they would go on to build some of the most legendary structures in all of ancient history.
So, after all that, after 3,000 years of incredible innovation, brutal wars, empires rising and falling, what's left? What's the legacy? Why should we, today, care about these ancient civilizations buried under the sands of Iraq?
Well, what's so amazing is that this stuff isn't just a bunch of historical footnotes. These are, and I mean this literally, the fundamental operating systems of our modern world. The very idea of a city, that's Mesopotamian. The concept that law should be written down and apply to everyone, yep, that started here. Even the way you tell time, the fact that there are 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour, that is a direct inheritance from the people who live between those two rivers.
And maybe that's the ultimate lesson here. Mesopotamia proved that incredible civilizations can rise from absolutely nothing. But does it also prove that they all must eventually fall? It's a big question, and one worth thinking about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.